One of the reasons progressives say they hate Donald Trump is because he lies a lot. Trump, they'll tell you, is a committed liar, an inveterate one. To prove the point, the left has set about trying to catalog Trump's dishonesty with the kind of scientific precision you normally associate with obsessed baseball fans or amateur bird watchers. As of last month, according to the Washington Post, Donald Trump has made a total of 13,435 false or misleading statements while in office. As the Post points out, the lying began at the inauguration. Perhaps you remember this claim, which at the time deeply offended official Washington.
Here's a picture of the crowd. Now, the audience was the biggest ever, but this crowd was massive. Look how far back it goes.
We're not going to lie to you. That was untrue. The crowd at the 2017 inauguration was not the largest ever measured on the National Mall. Sorry, it wasn't. Why did the president claim it was? Well, because that's who he is. Donald Trump is a salesman. He's a talker, a boaster, a booster, a compulsive self-promoter. At times, he's a full-blown BS artist. If Trump hadn't gotten rich in real estate, he could have made a fortune selling cars. Most people know this. It's obvious. It's transparent, really. So is lying really the reason the left despises Donald Trump? Or could the problem be, as is so often the case, the exact opposite of what they claim it is? Think back over the last 4 years. When have the CNN anchors been the angriest? Was it when Donald Trump told some whopper or exaggerated his own accomplishments? No. They're used to that kind of lying. Everyone who spends time around politicians is used to it. What infuriates official Washington is not when Trump lies, it's when he tells the truth. Truth is the real threat to their power. There's an unspoken agreement among the people in charge of our country not to talk about what has happened to it. They are personally implicated in its decline, for one thing. Often they're profiting from it. The last thing they want is a national conversation about what went wrong. And so they maintain an increasingly strict policy of mandatory reality avoidance. Everything's fine, they shout, voices rising in hysteria. Diversity is our strength. Shut up, or we'll hurt you. But Trump won't shut up. He keeps talking. That's his crime. That's why they hate him. It started with his very first speech as a presidential candidate.
When Mexico sends its people, they're not sending their best. They're not sending you. They're not sending you. They're sending people that have lots of problems, and they're bringing those problems with us. They're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists, and some, I assume, are good people.
Now, Trump didn't claim that everyone coming over the southern border is a criminal, but some are. And that's true. And precisely because it is true, you are absolutely under no circumstances allowed to say it. Acknowledging that not every illegal alien improves America raises an uncomfortable question. If illegal immigration has a downside, then why has Washington allowed so much of it? If the people in charge actually cared about us, they would protect our borders. But they don't care, so they've let millions and millions of foreigners, whose names we don't even know for certain, stream in from abroad to use our services, lower our wages, and yes, in some cases, commit crimes. That's all true, which almost by definition made it unacceptable to say. The news anchors pretended that by saying it, Trump was somehow attacking defenseless Mexicans. But actually, he was attacking them, the gatekeepers in our national media, the people who should have been sounding the alarm about all of this, but instead made common cause with the ruling class they were supposed to be covering and keeping honest. Our system is rotten and corrupt, and the news media are a major reason for why that is. That's what Donald Trump pointed out. And not surprisingly, they despised him for doing it. Ask yourself, what's a bigger scandal to your average journalist? The fact that homicidal MS-13 gang members have flooded into this country from Central America and now terrorize communities from Los Angeles to Long Island? Or the possibility that someone might complain about that? Well, we don't need to guess the answer because last year Donald Trump dared to complain about MS-13. Watch.
So when the MS-13 comes in, when the other gang members come into our country, I refer to them as animals. And guess what? I always will.
Now, keep in mind that the motto of MS-13 is literally kill, rape, control. He might not have known that, since details about what MS-13 actually is and what MS-13 actually does have received far less media attention than Donald Trump's criticism of the gang. Murdering the people with knives might be bad, but insulting illegal alien murderers is, in the moral hierarchy of Washington, a far graver sin.
There's a serious problem with the president dehumanizing any group of people in the United States, even if they are hardened criminals.
The history of political leaders dehumanizing opponents, even criminals, and using animal metaphors is a dangerous one.
And it is a very slippery slope when you start dehumanizing people this way. It's what the Nazis did.
We're all God's children. When the President of the United States says about undocumented immigrants, these aren't people, these are animals, you have to wonder, does he not believe in the spark of divinity?
We're all God's children, she tells us. Spoken like someone who knows her own children will never face the consequences of the policies she supports. Lost in the haze of all this moralizing was any meaningful discussion of those policies. Now, a cynic might say that was by design. It was the whole point of the tantrum. It's certainly a theme in Washington. A similar passion play unfolded just a few months before, when the president was heard speaking candidly about immigration in the White House. During a conversation with advisors, Trump asked why so many immigrants come to the U.S. from impoverished countries. If immigration is supposed to make America better, he asked, shouldn't we try to draw people from the most advanced societies? Well, it's an obvious question. You could debate it, of course, but it's a real question. So, of course, CNN had to scream at you just to make sure you would never ask that question.
This is very deeply offensive language. It says, the president quoted here, why are we having all these people from whole countries come here?
President Trump's shocking and racist remarks about immigrants coming from whole countries sparking disgust tonight.
Do you have any example of any whole country that the president referred to that is predominantly Caucasian?
I'm not surprised. In one way, I'm proud. I am a proud holder.
No, we are not all created equal, at least not if you are born in, as the president put it, a whole country.
My desperate grandparents from a country that was considered a hole by people like the president.
Oh, the posturing. But let's be real. Is there a single living person who disagrees with Trump's assessment of Haiti? Probably not. Certainly Haitian immigrants agree with him. That's why they moved here. Nobody on any of the CNN panels you just saw is relocating to Haiti anytime soon for the same reason. Oslo, Helsinki, Vienna, Vancouver, no problem. Port-au-Prince, no thanks. So if you want to know what people actually think, ignore what they say, especially on television. Watch what they do. No one really believes Haiti is an appealing place. On the other hand, criticizing Haiti in public calls into question decades of elite-approved immigration policy. So it must be forbidden, lest our leaders be embarrassed. That's what it's about. That's what it's always about. Pick a topic. Last year, after the killing of Saudi columnist Jamal Khashoggi, President Trump said, in effect, that while he disapproved of the murder, of course, Saudi Arabia remains a U.S. ally. The president cited the $450 billion worth of Saudi investments in the United States, as well as Saudi agreements to buy more than $100 billion in American military equipment. If we broke our alliance with the Saudis, he said, the U.S. economy would suffer and China and Russia would benefit instead. Now, whatever you think of the Saudis, and most sober people find them revolting, we certainly do, what he said is literally true. This is the arrangement we have. This is the arrangement we have had with the Saudi kingdom for generations now. Everyone in Washington knows that because a lot of them are actually on the Saudi payroll. Trump's crime was saying it out loud. That's always the crime. And the same, of course, is true with Baltimore. Baltimore may be the most depressing big city on the eastern seaboard. Ever been there? Everyone in Washington's been there. It's only an hour away. If you want to take the Acela from Washington to New York, you have to pass through Baltimore. And if it's daylight out, there's no denying the awful reality of the place. This summer, the president told the rest of the world what it's like. Baltimore, he said, is a, quote, rodent-infested hellhole, not to mention a, quote, corrupt mess. All undeniably true. The latest mayor of the town just went to jail again. But the obvious follow-up is, why is Baltimore so bad? How did it get so poor and so hopeless? And, of course, part of the answer is 50 years of uninterrupted Democratic Party rule hasn't helped Baltimore very much. But saying that would be embarrassing to the Democratic Party, so the party's apologists don't want to have that conversation. Instead, they attacked the man who tried to start it.
This weekend, racist messages raging from the president's Twitter feed.
Donald Trump masterfully makes it a racist debate about Baltimore.
Another racist attack on an African-American member of Congress and the city he represents.
Well, the president is, as he usually is, or often is, disgusting and racist.
He uses a racist appeal. He uses a bait and switch.
In the most bigoted and racist way.
Meanwhile, in Washington, the leaders of the Episcopal Church, and for the sake of technical accuracy, imagine air quotes around the word church, issued a florid statement calling the president's words about Baltimore, quote, dangerous. They no doubt felt virtuous issuing that statement, but nothing in the end changed in Baltimore. Baltimore remained actually dangerous, not in some theoretical academic Episcopal Church kind of way, where all the violence is to your feelings, but real danger, the kind where your kid gets shot riding his bike to the store. That's what life is like in the physical city of Baltimore, a place where MSNBC contributors and left-wing Protestant clerics fear to tread. That place is still sad and desperate and screwed up, and absolutely not one person in Washington, D.C. cares at all that it is, except to the extent that they want to make certain that you never think or talk about Baltimore, because thinking or talking about Baltimore, or for that matter, thinking or talking about, I don't know, mass immigration, the war in Afghanistan, middle-class life expectancy in decline, pick something. Thinking or talking about any of that might point up their own egregious failures and selfishness, which are profound. And whatever we do, we can't bring that up because it's embarrassing. So instead, let's just agree that Donald Trump is a racist liar and move on. And by the way, did you know that he's up to almost 14,000 lies by now? My gosh, what a bad person he is. Unlike us.